Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Monday, July 11th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Notre Dame game is in 54 days, the game against Michigan in 138 days. We are just over 2 weeks away from the start of Big Ten Media Days. That means we're getting actually pretty close to the end of at least what we consider the offseason. Once you get to Big Ten Media Days, then it's not long before you get into fall camp. Once you get to fall camp, it's not too long before that number for the Notre Dame game ticks down to zero. So we're getting very close to the end of the offseason, but we have an off-season-y kind of show for you here. We're going to be drafting players from the class of 2021 who we think could be breakout stars. Who do I do drafts with? Well, it's my own very own breakout star, Tony Gerdeman. He and I host the Buckeye Weekly podcast together. Tony, thank you as always for being here.
Tom, thank you for having me. And don't sell yourself short. You're a tremendous slouch. One day, you too will be a breakout star.
Dare to dream. I am younger than you, so I guess I'm not quite as close to the end of my eligibility as you are. And the reason we're picking 2021s, these are members of the class of 2021, so second year players, either true sophomores or redshirt freshmen. But if you go back to the history of Ohio State football, there are a lot of second year players who do turn into breakout stars, especially on teams that do pretty spectacular things. I mean, famously, Ohio State had the Super Sophs for 1968. That's Rex Kern and that whole class that really turned around the whole trajectory of Ohio State football. Won the national championship, beat Michigan, and then only lost 2 games in their 3-year careers. You've got over the 2014 season, lots of second-year breakout players. Joey Bosa, of course, played the year before, so we're not going to count him. But Ezekiel Elliott, Billy Price, Vonn Bell, Eli Apple, Darron Lee. That was a huge chunk of that 2014 team. You may remember a quarterback named Justin Fields, who in his second year as a college player, first year as a Buckeye, led Ohio State to the college football playoff. And of course, last year, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, CJ Stroud, both second year players. So the bar is pretty high here for what constitutes a breakout. I think we're going to probably be drafting three guys each. And Tony, as the guest, I will let you have the first pick.
Are we doing a snake draft here, Tom?
We don't have to. I'll even let you just take. I'll even let you take the first pick in every round.
Well, I'll let you know what the first name that came to my mind in this was JT Tuimoloau. And that who I have at the top of my board, knowing that there has to be some receiver numbers that need to be replaced. And so there's a couple of second year guys, Tom. I don't want to spoil it for you, but there's some second year guys in that receiver room that are probably going to do very big things statistically. But for me, I think JT Tuimoloau of that entire group has the most upside in terms of impact at the next level, which maybe isn't the best measure, but I do think um, he's going to be part of a rotation. But I think when he's in there, he's going to be tough against the run. He's going to get to the quarterback. He's going to be one of these guys that offenses have to worry about. And so, um, knowing that it is not a snake draft and that I will be able to get a receiver, I am going with JT Tuimoloau, number one overall here.
Yeah, that was the first name I had on my list as well. And you've got, I mean, there are a couple wide receivers. There's a couple defensive ends that I think are going to probably you're going to hear their names at some point. Might hear an interior defensive lineman, might hear an offensive lineman, and there's a lot of good choices here. Tony's nodding. I think we probably have the same top 6 on both of our boards. But yeah, there are a lot of good choices here. JT Tuimoloau, though, I think would be at the top of my list. He had such a good freshman year with no, no spring ball, barely, barely arrived before summer camp started, and then immediately was on the field for game one. Came a long way during the course of the season. Now he's had a full off season. Now he's working in a defense that I think we're all expecting will be quite a bit better this year. He seems like he is pretty clearly the number one pick here to me. But yes, there are a number of other choices. Since you've tipped your hand that you're probably taking a wide receiver first, I will save the other defensive end for a little bit later. I'm going Marvin Harrison here. Marvin Harrison Jr. You score 3 touchdowns in the Rose Bowl. I mean, we had a conversation before we hit record about would Chris Olave count as a second year breakout player, and it's like, well, he did score 2 touchdowns against Michigan, but on the whole, the season on the whole was not necessarily he wasn't the big breakout star that year. So he would probably count. Marvin Harrison, kind of the same thing. He didn't put up huge numbers during the course of the season, but then once Olave and Wilson were gone, 3 touchdowns in the Rose Bowl. It feels like CJ Stroud has figured out that Marvin Harrison is going to be an attractive red zone target, and you will probably see more of Marvin Harrison catching the ball on places on the field where the grass is painted. Feels like this might be a very big season for him in terms of red zone production and just overall just putting up some pretty good numbers in what should be a pretty explosive Ohio State offense.
Yeah, he was number 2 on my list. I think at some point this offseason, we'll have to try to narrow down some numbers that we expect from these guys and from everybody else. But to me, you're a starting receiver at Ohio State now, so 1,000 yards, 1,000 receiving yards isn't out of the picture, especially if you're playing more than 13 games. So, yeah, he was my easy number 2. I expect, again, we've talked about him in the past. Where how much is he going to rotate? You might see some rotation with some of the other guys, but he's a unique cat, and so I don't expect anything but a lot. So I don't know if that's if it's a single negative, a double negative there, but he's going to have a big season.
Yeah, I'll let you. I will try and figure out what the heck you just said while you make your next pick for the number 3 overall selection.
Yeah, I got to go with Emeka Ibuka here, and I don't know if he's going to start. I don't know how many games he's going to start. It doesn't matter. He's going to play a lot. If he's still the kickoff returner, he's going to do some damage there. I'm expecting, he can play all over. They can move him around. They can move Jaxon Smith-Njigba around and put Buka in the slot. There's going to be plenty of snaps, and even if he doesn't start a single game, I still see 40 plus catches in that range for him, and over 1,000 all-purpose yards from receiving, kickoff return. Maybe he gets into punt returns. We don't know, but a guy that you really can't use him enough, and can do some different things, and can also be a big play guy. We saw the 85 yarder or whatever last year, and a guy that can take a short pass a long way or just get open deep as well. So I think the third or fourth leading receiver on the team is still plenty good enough to break out.
With the amount of production we're talking about in terms of the passing game this year, at least in terms of what we're expecting out of the passing game this year, you could be the third receiver and be in that 1,000 yard kind of range. We spent a bunch of time last year trying to figure out if they were going to get to 3,000 yard receivers, and really the only reason they didn't was because Olave sat out the Rose Bowl game. Otherwise, they almost certainly would have gotten there. And if you're playing more than 13 games, they definitely would have gotten there. So it feels like that's going to be a real opportunity to have again 3,000 yard kind of receivers there. So that's the two receivers that I think are good picks there. I'm going back to the defensive end. Well, you went on the strong side of the defensive line with JT Tuimoloau. I'm going to go over to the weak side and take Jack Sawyer. It just feels like he came in with pretty much as much hype as JT Tuimoloau did. You saw flashes from him last year. He was sort of as advertised and as expected. Didn't play his senior year of high school football, so you knew there was going to be a little bit of a curve there in terms of getting up to speed. But he was a contributor during the course of the season, and now I feel like Jim Knowles gets like at least 20% of the credit here, just because how much have we talked about that Jack position, the Leo position, the whatever you want to call that weak side defensive end is potentially going to be moving around a little bit. That's a spot where Jim Knowles was working with talent that was decidedly not 5-star talent in previous years, and even had multiple guys in that like 10 sack kind of range at that position, just because of the way it's designed, the way that defense is schemed up. That's a guy who's coming as a free hitter sometimes. It just feels like if you have a bigger, stronger, faster version of last year's guy, and you're going to put up those types of numbers potentially if the defense comes together the way it seems like it should.
Yeah, I had somebody tell me this recently. Jack Sawyer just killing it in the weight room and really beginning to blossom in all facets. And you look at, as you said, what Jim Knowles in that position has done at Oklahoma State, where they split with two guys running that position. And I think they've combined for 19 and a half sacks and something like 29 and a half tackles for loss. And, again, there's going to be split reps. There's going to be rotation at defensive end all along the defensive line. So I don't see Jack Sawyer playing 60 or 70% of the snaps. But if you give him 50, that's still plenty to make a significant mark, especially at that position. And I'm not saying he's going to be an All-American, but Tom, would you be shocked if he produced and earned first team All-American accolades this year?
I wouldn't be shocked by either of those defensive ends being a first team All American this year. I mean, just the way that production, the way those uh, awards are typically voted on, it's a lot of name recognition and brand recognition in terms of schools and just raw stats. And Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, they're going to be playing a lot of high profile games. They're going to get talked about a bunch. They're going to get talked about a bunch as a duo on those broadcasts. You'll have the graphic with both of their headshots up there, and it'll be dynamic duo or Super Sophs or whatever they want to, whatever they're going to brand them as. The stats are going to be there. You could be looking potentially. This is not me predicting. This is just potentially to both of them with double digit sack numbers or at least high single digit sack numbers. And then that graphic, and then that graphic is up there, and everyone sees it, and everyone in their head goes, "Hey, these guys are really good." And then all of a sudden, when it's voting time, that shows up. Those names show up on the ballot. So I would not be surprised at all if Sawyer was someone who ended up an All American. Neither nor for Tui Moloau.
Right. It's totally unfair to expect them both, Tom. I completely disagree with you there. You're putting that too much on them at this point. But either or, certainly, no, I think huge things are in store for both of those guys. My final pick comes down to two guys. I won't give you the second because I don't want to give you ideas.
I bet they both play on the line, but on opposite sides of the ball.
You don't know me.
What do I win?
You win the guy I'm not going to pick. I am going with Donovan Jackson. He was my number 4 guy on here. Jack Sawyer, number 5 for me. But Donovan Jackson is going to be starting on the offensive line at left guard. He says all the right things as one of the strongest guys on the team, willing to do whatever, as we saw last year when he came in and was the third tight end or fourth tight end. And not just that he was willing, but also capable, because capable of handling it physically, capable of handling it mentally to go and do that, because it's completely different position than when he's playing right guard and you got somebody right there in front of you. When you're playing that H back, full back, tight end, like you've got to go find somebody to go and block, and it's a little bit different than just having them right in front of your face. So he has the capability to handle a lot, and I expect him to be very, very, very good at left guard, and he wants to be, and he has been working on the little things, the big things, and all conference player wouldn't shock me even a little.
Yeah, he's another one who I think is a very easy pick for this because he was someone who, as you mentioned, came in and didn't just come in and contribute at tight end partway through the season. Game one at Minnesota, I was down kind of in the tunnel outside the Ohio State locker room, and I had heard someone talking about, hey, we've got to get a number 41 jersey out there in case we want to play him at tight end. And I was like, who are they talking about? And it was Donovan Jackson. And for game one of your true freshman season to be one where they trust you to the point where they're willing to put you out there in a conference game. This was not Arkansas State. This was not Akron. This is a road conference game, day one, and they're trusting you to be out there in short yardage goal line situations, high leverage spots. That is really telling to me. And then going through the spring this year, it has felt like yes, Ohio State's replacing a couple guys on the offensive line, but we all know who the starter is going to be, and it's been sort of a foregone conclusion that's going to be Donovan Jackson. And they have other guys. They have other guys they trust, but he's just so far it feels like ahead of the rest of the pack right now that he's someone who seems like he's definitely on track to be, to be a real serious contributor this year, potentially a star this year. And then, if they trust him to move out to potentially left tackle next year, if that's needed, they like him. They like his ability, his agility, all of that enough that they trust him potentially at left tackle next year. That tells me even more than all the other stuff we talked about. My last pick, I'm going across the line of scrimmage. I'm going to take Tyleik Williams. Tyleik Williams, Tony, I completely suckered you into this. JT Tuimoloau last year, your first overall pick, 4.5 tackles for loss. Tyleik Williams, 6.5. JT Tuimoloau, 2.5 sacks. Tyleik Williams, 5 sacks. Checkmate, nerd. Tyleik Williams, someone who was, I think last year, people always wanted to see more. Like you saw little bits of him, you saw him in short bursts, and you kept hearing these really exciting things about him, and then he'd just sort of disappear for a while. And kind of started hearing, you found out later, just maybe it was a little bit of a conditioning thing, just wasn't quite physically ready to hold up as an every down guy. He sounds like he's ready to do that now. And that's, he's a guy who there was a stat that came out that he was the fastest or one of the fastest guys on the team in a 10-yard sprint. He's not going to chase you 90 yards down the field, but he is quick. And when you think through some of the other interior Ohio State defense linemen who've been quick, Devon Hamilton was always talked about, like how quick he was off the line of scrimmage. Those are the guys who put up, shockingly big numbers for an interior defensive lineman. He's big, he's fun, he's got kind of the likable personality. It just feels like everything is kind of coming together for him to really be a star this year.
I think you could have a bunch of different people do this draft, and you'll see any of these three defensive linemen or Marvin Harrison end up number one. And I don't think there's a huge argument to disagree. Like I could see Tyleik Williams being number one on this. And there was nobody as productive as he was in the snaps per snap. Nobody on the defensive line at Ohio State. The You look at the snap numbers between him and like Zach Sawyer or Teron Vincent, like the sheer amount of tackles for loss and sacks per snap. And yes, I think 1.5 sacks, 2 tackles for loss came against Akron, but when he is out there and other times he's producing. And now the understanding of why he wasn't playing, he understands that. And that's the biggest factor. Like everybody else can say it till they're blue in the face, but until the kid hears it, internalizes it, understands it, and goes to remedy it, it doesn't matter. And this is something he is planning to remedy, and he wants to be out there because, you know, and I think the coaches want him out there just as much as he does because they see what happens when he is out there. And yeah, I'm sure there are plenty of people listening to this right now saying Tyleik Williams should have gone number one. I had him number 6, just because I like all of these guys. And honestly, whichever order you take these 6 in, you're going to get 3 really, really good ones. And then you're going to be sorry to see the other 3 go.
And I think really we could have gone a 4th round here because there's a pair of cornerbacks that I think
Mm-hmm.
would have been, I think the top 6 are the top 6, and we had the same top 6. But J.K. Johnson, Jordan Hancock, those are guys who are both. One of them is going to be the 3rd cornerback this year, just because of the way the roster is right now. The other one's going to be the 4th cornerback. Both are potentially at least going to be rotational players. And if someone gets hurt, or if one of them just beats someone out, it is entirely possible you have one of those guys leading the team in interceptions this year, or being kind of the second team All Big Ten cornerback who you weren't talking about yet. We're not really talking about those guys now, but those guys, both of them have, and they're almost interchangeable to me because they came in with very similar recruiting rankings. They both did not play a whole heck of a lot last year. J.K. Johnson played 1 snap and then got hurt and was out for the year. Jordan Hancock played a little bit against, Rutgers and Akron and teams like that, but not a whole heck of a lot, at least on defense. And so, I think those 2 guys are both fairly similar to me in terms of possible production this year. And it's just kind of a coin flip as to which one of them you want to take. But, if you give me both of those guys, one of them I think is someone who we're talking about as potentially a breakout star by the end of the year.
And somebody else is saying, what about Mike Hall? And it's like, you're absolutely right. can't can't argue with that. Somebody else is saying, what about Jaden Ballard? You are correct, sir. There's a number of guys there that are now's the time. Second year, if you don't do it in the second year, people start wondering, and then they start putting you in the portal before you even get a chance to get to your third year of practice.
Yeah, and it's crazy because it feels like these guys just got here, and then at the end of the year, they could be a year away from the NFL draft. These the college careers, I always find it feels like the time between when guys are recruits and when guys are off to the NFL feels like it's shrinking. It just the college careers just keep getting shorter and shorter and shorter as time goes by. But yeah, those are guys. I mean, we just named what 10 potential players, and in all of them, you kind of as you're talking, I'm kind of nodding along. Yeah, that's a viable answer there too. So yeah, there a lot of very exciting young talent on this year's Ohio State football team. Might be a good season. Will it be? I guess we'll all have to tune in together and find out. Sure seems like the pieces are potentially there for a pretty darn good Ohio State football season. The pieces are in there also for a pretty darn good day full of podcast listening, if you are so inclined, because we have a lot of great podcasts on our podcast network. Tony and I do the Buckeye Weekly show. Mark Givler and Bill Green do the Gives in the Bank podcast. Kevin Noon does the Big Me Kickoff. Alex Slightman does Around the Oval. They are all fantastic shows. You can find them all wherever you find this. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of them. You can subscribe right there and leave us a 5-star rating and review as well. And if you're watching this on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button. That helps us reach a broader audience. We're always interested in growing the show. If you enjoy the show, leave a nice comment. Hit that thumbs up button. That will help other folks find those shows on YouTube as well. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.